Don't you love when a game just comes out of nowhere and absolutely blows you away? Imagine for a moment if you took Bloodborne, Bioshock, and Pinnochio, mash them all together, the result would be something pretty close to Lies of P, a new upcoming action RPG from South Korean publisher Neowiz. I recently tried out the demo for the game, and honestly, I am pretty blown away, guys. People of the internet, RetroRaconteur here. I'm just a dad who loves games and the stories they tell, and up until a few weeks ago, I had never even heard of Lies of P. I was actually on vacation during the Summer Game Fest, but one game that I kept hearing about was Lies of P, and also that they released a demo. So this past week, without looking at any footage whatsoever, I decided to download the demo, give it a try, and wow, there's just one tiny little thing I think it's missing, but we'll get to that. So as soon as you boot up the game, the main menu will materialize on the screen, and it really helps to set the tone for what you're about to play. On the right, you have this mechanical golden heart, which you can hear clicking, in addition to the thunderstorm and then the somber piano tune playing as well. I know it's just a menu, but there was something about it that really sort of set the mood for me. The demo begins when our protagonist, P, is awakened by a mysterious voice, which asks the player to make their way to Hotel Krat and promises more information about what's going on once we arrive. Before making your way to the hotel, you'll get to choose one of 3 classes, each offering a distinct starting weapon. This choice significantly impacts the gameplay experience, allowing players to tailor their approach to combat. In fact, I'm even thinking about going and playing through again as one of these other classes to really get a feel for how they're different. As you begin to venture through the grim streets of Krat, you'll see it was a once vibrant city that's now been tainted by madness and bloodlust. The inspiration of both Bioshock and Bloodborne will be incredibly clear here to anyone who's played those games. And as I mentioned in the intro, Lies of P is actually a retelling of the classic story of Pinocchio. And here's an area where I actually think it may have even more appeal than something like Bloodborne, which I absolutely loved. It's one of my favorite games ever made. But let's be honest, the story, not exactly an easy one to follow. Lies of P takes the essence of the classic Pinocchio story, but with a twist, which should offer a fresh and exciting take on the beloved tale. Throughout the game, the echoes of the original Pinocchio story resound within the city of Krat. The setting, characters, and even the loading screens pay homage to the classic story. So we eventually learn the mysterious voice belongs to someone named Sophia, and she warns that the city streets are far from safe. So you'll end up encountering a few basic enemy types on your way to the hotel. Most of these enemies are puppets and mechanical in nature, but Neowiz promises all sorts of monsters in the final game, with puppets only being one of many. They also promise that in the final game you'll encounter a diverse cast of characters, each harboring their own motivations and secrets. Some may offer guidance and aid, while others may seek to exploit P for their own gain. And you do get to meet a few of these in the demo. The atmosphere of Lies of P is a hauntingly beautiful tribute to the Belle Epoque era. Despite the city's descent into darkness, remnants of its former glory still resonate through the decaying architecture that showcases both the allure and despair of a world corrupted by lies. And speaking of lies, this is one mechanic in Lies of P that I'm very curious to know more about. You see, P is crafted from a puppet's heart, yet he yearns to understand what it means to think and feel like a human. There will be choices throughout the game where you can give comfort to those who are suffering by lying, or you can choose to tell the truth. Each decision shapes P's character and alters the course of the narrative. Are you a puppet or a human? And that question is so fascinating to me, especially as I think more about the demo. Are you a puppet or a human? What exactly do they mean by puppet? Because in the demo, I'm not going to spoil the exact choices, but the characters basically tell you that you need to lie, at least in one of the situations. And I just went ahead and lied. Didn't even think about it being an option to say the other one. And so then I started thinking about, wait, am I a puppet to them? Am I just doing exactly what they say? Does the game want me to tell the truth instead? But if you tell the truth, it's very kind of cold-hearted in some instances. The second choice, oh man, I like to think of myself, I'm a pretty truthful person. I do not lie. However, in this situation, I straight up lied to this person because in my mind, it was much better to lie to them than actually tell them what was a pretty gruesome truth. The demo is impressively extensive, boasting a pretty substantial amount of content for players to explore. I spent about 5 hours trying to see and do everything, plus, yes, I did die a handful of times. I would say even experienced Souls players will have a couple of deaths, especially on the bosses. I'm still trying to decide how I feel about the difficulty overall. Initially, I thought, oh wow, this is way too easy. And even when I was dying early, it was very clear why I was dying. But then I reached the final boss of the demo, of which there are 3 total bosses here. And each of these encounters really did provide provide a unique challenge. The first one felt pretty balanced for what I assume is going to be the first boss fight in the final game as well. The second one, though, way too easy, especially once you realize that he can be backstabbed. Just over and over and over, backstab, backstab, backstab. I thought the third boss was by far the most challenging and the one that required the most knowledge of the game's combat system. I thought this demo just did such a great job of showcasing the core elements and the gameplay mechanics that really show how this could be a standout title and definitely one you should have on your radar. Now, speaking of gameplay, I thought it felt really good overall. And just when you feel like you understand everything, the game will throw another layer at you. And so it kind of keeps adding on this even throughout the demo. So I can't imagine once you get the final game in your hands, how many layers upon layers upon layers there's going to be. But this is a very good thing, I think. And it did this gradually. I thought the demo really handled it well in terms of how they introduced these new mechanics to you, and even still left enough that's kind of a mystery. In fact, even when the demo ends, you can still kind of go around and explore, and you can actually see some of the upgrades that you're going to be able to get in the final game. And then there's some other ones that you can't see at all, you just know they're there. So I think the combat is really something that's going to just get deeper and deeper as you go. If you've played any of the Souls games, particularly Bloodborne, you're going to feel right at home here. And at the same time, I do think there are enough tweaks that differentiate it from the Souls games. Make no mistake though, this game is unabashedly inspired by From Software, and you'll see that throughout the demo and presumably the final game as well. So R1 is going to be used for your light attacks, R2 for heavy attacks, L1 blocks, and then you have L2, which controls your mechanical left arm. And speaking of upgrades, you can get upgrades for what they call the Legion arm. It starts out as just this strong melee attack, but later on I found an item that modified it into being able to grapple enemies. It like shoots out this harpoon. And then there's another electric one that I found toward the very end. Okay, blocking and parrying. This is a really interesting system here, and you can see they've sort of combined elements from Sekiro and Bloodborne. So if you just hold L1, you'll use your weapon to block, and the stats of the weapon you're holding plus the enemy, that's going to determine how much damage that you'll actually be able to block. I actually went with the path of the sweeper class for the demo, which is the one focused on strength, so my weapon was this large greatsword, and it blocked a fair amount of damage on every hit. Okay, now here's where things start to get interesting. Remember Bloodborne's system that allowed you to attack shortly after getting hit and regain some of your health? Lies of P has a very similar system in place, but with a twist. You'll only be able to regain a portion of the health back if you're blocking. So if you take a hit without blocking, you can't regain any of that health back by attacking. You'll have to heal normally. Oh, and did I also mention the enemies? They can do this too. In fact, they don't even have to attack you to start regaining some of their health. That's right, every enemy in the game, and it really encourages you to stay aggressive so you're not just gonna run off and hide in a corner. Now, I feel like this is balanced out by not giving the enemy the ability to fully heal, at least the enemies that I encountered in the game. And you'll be able to tell by looking at that section that's sort of grayed out. Now, to add a further wrinkle to this, the game also has a parrying system. So if you manage to time your block at just the right moment, you'll block 100% of the attack and not take any damage at all. Oh yeah, and remember how I said there's one thing missing? There's no satisfying riposte. One of my favorite things to do in Bloodborne, and one of the components that made that combat feel so satisfying was hitting your shot at just the right time and then moving in for the visceral attack. Now there is sort of a version of this, we'll get to that here in a second, and who knows, maybe there will be something later on you unlock that's going to enable a special attack immediately after parrying. But right now, at least to me, it just doesn't feel like you're rewarded for landing that perfect parry against the basic enemies. To me, it offers some risk, but not much reward, at least with how I currently understand the system. I think you're just better off dodging against these standard enemies. Boss fights, definitely a different story though. I really struggled with this third boss until I finally started getting the timing down on the parries more consistently. Now, all that being said, there is a way to put the enemy in a vulnerable state and open them up to a more powerful, visceral-like attack. The game refers to this as a groggy state, and you can trigger it by doing a charged, strong attack anytime you see their HP bar highlighted in white. After landing that charged attack, you'll see a red symbol that appears on the enemy, which means they're set up for a fatal attack that you execute by facing the enemy and pressing R1. As for what triggers that groggy state and the change in the health bar, I think there's a hidden posture bar system here, very similar to what Elden Ring had, although I would like to do a little more testing to be exactly sure what makes that highlight appear. I know you can trigger it just by attacking a lot, but I think perfect parries may add to this as well. Now, if you're wondering about this meter over here on the right, that is the sharpness of your weapon. You'll need to keep an eye on this a lot, especially anytime you're going into a big fight. You want to make sure that is fully sharpened. It's essentially a weapon durability system, so your weapon's going to drop anytime you attack or block. Landing a perfect parry, though, does not result in a loss of durability, which is just yet another example of how important parrying is going to be in this game. You do have a default item called the grinder that will sharpen your weapon, and you can use this even in the middle of battle. This aspect of the combat is one I'm still honestly not sure how I feel about overall. It's not like other games where your weapon is going to completely break and it's lost forever, and I have to say, it definitely adds an additional layer to combat though, because you have to make sure you don't let the weapon completely break. If it happens in a boss fight, even though there's a way to fully repair it, you just aren't going to realistically have enough time to use it with any sort of powerful enemy nearby. And all of that is just the basics of combat. There are so many more layers to it. You should definitely check out the demo for yourself. I've actually uploaded my full playthrough over on my Let's Play channel. I'll link it here on the right side of the screen now. Check it out next. As always, guys, thank you all so much for watching. I'll talk to you again soon.